The morning had been perfect. Coffee steamed in my hand, black and bitter the way I liked it. I leaned against the cedar post I'd set just last week, admiring the way the dew still clung to the wood. My gate stood clean and proud, the final touch to a drive I'd spent weeks grading myself. Then the sound came a crack, a rip of splintering wood so sharp it snapped through the calm like a gunshot. Gravel spat under tires. I turned just in time to see a white SUV barreling through my brand-new ranch gate. The cedar beam split clean in half, one side dragging under her bumper sparks flying. "Hey!" I shouted, coffee sloshing across my wrist. The driver didn't stop. Karen, the HOA president, sat straight behind the wheel, sunglasses on, lips set in a smirk. She didn't even look my way. The SUV rolled across my drive like she owned the place, then cut back through the pasture fence as if nothing stood in her path. I stood in the dust heat rising in my chest. This land had been mine since my father left it to me. The fence lines were surveyed and stamped, recorded in the county deed office. That gate had been the symbol of my independence, something I could see every morning, proof the ranch still belonged to me. By afternoon, I was sweating, hammer in hand, dragging a fresh cedar post from the pile. Splinters dug into my palms. I cursed under my breath with each swing of the hammer. Nails bent, the wood bit back. "She'll keep doing it," I muttered, though no one stood near. The sun dipped low. By the time the gate stood upright again, my shirt clung to me soaked. It wasn't as straight as the first time, but it was standing. That was enough. The next morning, my mailbox held an envelope. The logo at the top made my stomach clench. Lakeside Community Homeowners Association. Inside, the letter read, "Notice of violation, unsightly structure. The gate at your address must be removed immediately for non-compliance with community aesthetics." My thumb smeared sweat across the paper. "Unsightly structure," I whispered. "It's my land. I'm not even in the HOA." I walked the drive until I saw her again. Karen parked her SUV right at the edge of my gravel. She rolled the window down, slow sunglasses hiding her eyes. "This is my property," I said, holding the notice out. "The deed says it plain. Polk County Courthouse, 1979. My father's name still on it." Karen tilted her head. "Not above the HOA," she answered coolly. "You'll learn." I felt the words like a punch. "You don't have jurisdiction here." Her lips curved just slightly. "We'll see." She rolled the window back up and drove off, dust cloud curling behind her. I pressed the notice flat against my thigh paper, damp in my hand. The HOA seal gleamed in blue at the top. Unsightly structure. Back inside, I sat at the kitchen table. My coffee had gone cold. The letter shook between my fingers. I whispered to myself, almost laughing at the absurdity, "But I'm not even in the HOA." The sound came before I saw them. A low rumble rolled across the pasture, heavier than one set of tires. I stepped off the porch, coffee forgotten on the rail, and watched the line appear: 3 SUVs, a pickup with a clipboard propped against the dash, and a sedan tucked in at the back. Karen led the convoy, of course. Her white SUV glittered under the Texas sun, hood pointed straight at my drive like she was parading a victory lap. Gravel popped under their wheels as they rolled past me. Not one slowed. A few of the passengers actually waved, as if cutting across my property was part of some Sunday outing. Morning Mr. Bishop called Trevor, the board secretary, pen already twitching in his hand. He leaned half out of the pickup clipboard, balanced against his thigh. "We're here for a routine inspection." "Inspection," I barked. "You don't inspect private land." Trevor didn't answer. He scribbled fast, eyes darting to my repaired gate, then to the fresh gravel I'd spread. Karen idled at the top of the drive, sunglasses hiding her eyes. I couldn't see her smirk, but I felt it. The convoy turned across the pasture, following the same rut Karen had carved weeks earlier. Dust curled up, hanging in the hot air. I waited until they'd gone before walking to the gate. Another envelope hung crooked in the mailbox, stamped with the HOA seal. "Notice of violation, unapproved structure. Failure to comply will result in fines." I crushed the paper in my fist. Sweat rolled down my temple, stinging my eye. By noon, the cicadas screamed so loud it felt like static in my ears. I drove into town, notice still balled in my pocket, and pushed through the glass doors of the sheriff's office. The air conditioning hit cold and stale, smelling faintly of fried food. Deputy Cole Avery sat behind the desk, boots crossed on a drawer. He didn't look up until I slapped the notice down. "They drove through again," I said. "Not just her this time, a whole line of them. On my land." Cole picked up the letter, squinted, then set it down. "You got video. I don't need video. I've got a deed, recorded at the county clear as daylight. He leaned back, toothpick shifting between his teeth. Without video, it's your word against hers. I felt heat crawl up my neck. So, you're telling me they can run caravans through my pasture and the law's answer is, get a camera. Not saying it's right, Cole answered, calm as a pond. I'm saying that's how it is. Bring me footage, then we'll talk. I stood silent for a moment, jaw tight. The ceiling fan creaked above us. Finally, I asked, what about trespass? That's still on the books, isn't it? Cole shrugged. I'll note it down. He pulled a yellow pad from the drawer and scribbled a line slow like he was logging a grocery list. Back at the ranch, the sun had dropped just enough to throw long shadows across the drive. My gate leaned slightly from the morning's abuse. Trevor's scrawl, I knew, was already filed in some HOA binder. As if on cue, Karen's SUV appeared again at the property line. She didn't drive through this time. She just stopped window rolling down. Community spirit, she called voice, smooth, almost sweet. You'll learn? I gripped the post cedar, biting into my palm. Not on my land, I shouted back. She smiled, sharp as glass, and rolled the window up. The SUV reversed slow gravel crunching under her tires until she disappeared back toward the subdivision. The mailbox banged in the wind. I opened it on reflex. Inside sat another sheet, their inspection log. Lines of neat handwriting, each item checked non-compliant. Fence height, gate material, even general appearance. My hand shook as I read. The cicadas had gone quiet. For a second, all I heard was the snap of Cole's toothpick in my head. No footage, no case. The first thing I noticed in Hank's garage was the light white-hot stuttering through the gaps of his tin roof as his welder spat a shower of sparks. The fans whirred overhead, pushing warm air that smelled like burnt metal and wet grass. Hank lifted his hood and grinned at me through a fog of smoke. Bring the problem, he said. We'll bring the posts. I need a gate that won't fall to a bumper, I told him. Something that doesn't blink when an SUV gets ideas. He tapped the steel table. Then stop thinking lumber. He dragged a stub of carpenter's pencil across a scrap of pine. Think bones. I watched his hand scar-mapped steady sketch a pair of posts sunk deep with rebar cages cross-braced in a way that made them look more bridge than ranch gate. He added a hinge block, big as my fist, and an anchor plate like a jaw. Build it so no engine can bully it down, Hank said, eyes flicking up. And make it look pretty enough the busybodies see only cedar. I nodded. A steel heart with a wooden suit. Exactly. He turned the scrap toward me. 4-foot spread of footer, 12 inches thick, number 4 bar, tied on 12-inch centers. You still remember your knots. Muscle memory, I said. Been a while. He slid a neat stack of sketches across end view elevation hardware list in his block caps. I flattened the paper and left a fingerprint in the smudge of pencil graphite. You got a mixer? He asked. I got shoulders, I said. Those help, he said and snorted. But rent the mixer anyway. We spent the afternoon building a bill of materials square tubing angle plate, anchor bolts, hinge pins. Hank wrote it all down like a grocery list for a very hungry gate. When we finished, he clapped the dust off his hands and looked at me. You sure? He asked, voice quieter. I'm past sure. He studied my face a second longer, then nodded. Good. Because once you stand it, you're telling the whole county you mean it. Let them hear me. The steel yard near Livingston rang like a bell. Forklifts beeped. The sun turned raw edges into lines of white fire. I picked through racks for straight lengths, flipped a few to check twist, and pushed the cart toward the scale. The clerk stamped my invoice with a thunk that echoed inside the office like a small verdict. Back at Hank's, I laid the steel invoice on his workbench, the paper still hot from the printer. He snapped a photo with his old flip phone. Why the picture, I asked. Paper gets wet, he said. Phones keep secrets longer. We chalked center lines and cut the first pieces Hank, showing the angle grinder to the steel like an introduction between old enemies. The discs hissed and threw bright ribbons. He had me hold a square while he kissed edges to 90. Your turn, he said finally, handing me the hood. I slipped it down and the world went black except for a narrow green window. I tucked my elbows, found the puddle, and felt the arc grab like a hand. The bead wobbled, found the groove, and then it sang soft, patient, like something that had been waiting for me to catch up. Not bad, Hank said when I lifted the hood. You're a hair cold. Bump it. I bumped it. The next pass flowed smoother coins stacked by a careful banker. Sweat trickled down my ribs. The fan pushed smoke past my ears and out the open bay where a strip of pasture glowed late summer green. You're going to dress it in cedar, Hank said. So trim, your weld's proud, but not ugly. We want the strength, not the story. The story's for me, I said. He laughed. Damn right. We broke for water on the tailgate. The sketch sat between us, greasy thumbprints at the corners. I traced the hinge block with a wet finger. "Think the county will call it a structure?" I asked. He wiped his forehead with a rag. "Everything's a structure to people with clipboards. You're building a boundary. Boundaries scare them. I'm not trying to scare anyone," I said. "I'm trying to breathe." He looked at me sideways. "Well, breathe like a man who pours footers." We set string lines and spray-painted marks on the gravel. I drilled the post holes the bit, coughing up red dirt in stubborn clods. The deeper we went, the cooler the soil, damp and sweet. I twisted in rebar cages, wired intersections, and checked plumb with the level until the bubble sat like a patient eye. Around sunset, I loaded the mixer and let the barrel churn its wet music. Hank tamped, lifted, tamped again, tapping the forms with a hammer to shake air to the surface. "Talk to me," he said. "About what?" "What you're going to say when she shows up again. I'll say, 'Turn around,' like I always do, and when she doesn't, I'll say it to the camera." Hank grunted approval. "Build the thing, then build the record." The concrete set under a skin. We took measurements once more and welded the lower crossbrace to the plates. When the arc struck, I felt something line up inside me like the first time you lift a wall and hear it thud into level, or the first time a door shuts with the right kind of click. The sound you can trust. Calder Hank said, watching my bead. "That's the one. That's the bead that lets you sleep." I held it steady, shoulders burning, jaw clenched light, pulsing against my eyelids. When I killed the arc, the garage seemed too quiet. "That's your microclimax right there," he said, not using the word, just meaning it. "You took back something." We fitted the hinge blocks. I swung the frame in place, testing the geometry without the cedar face. It moved like a heavy promise. "Looks like nothing," I said, panting. "And that's the idea," Hank said. "Let it look like a gate. Let it be a wall." We sat on the tailgate again, looking out at the property line. The air tasted of dust and tin. On the far side of my pasture, a white SUV idled at the edge of the subdivision road. It didn't cross. It waited, engine ticking in the heat like a metronome set to someone else's patience. Hank squinted. "You expecting company?" "I'm expecting witnesses," I said. He pushed himself off the bumper. "Let's dress the frame tomorrow. Cedar slats, countersunk screws, hinge caps you can grease without a show." I picked up the sketch and slid it into a plastic sleeve. "Tomorrow. Tonight, I want one more pass." "Then make it," he said. "Because from here on out, you're not just fixing a gate, you're setting a tone." I pulled my gloves back on, lowered the hood, and traced the last seam along the inside of the brace. My hands stopped shaking. When the puddle cooled, I could see the little rainbow sheen across the bead, thin as oil on a creek. Hank clapped my shoulder. "That's a gate," he said. Outside, a car door clicked. I turned, blinking past the afterimage of the arc. Karen's SUV had crept closer to the property line. The tinted window slid down 2 inches. Something small and glassy glinted in the gap. A phone camera. Watching. I didn't wave. I didn't speak. I just stood there in the doorway of Hank's shop, mask pushed up on my head, chest rising and falling, the steel frame cooling behind me, and let her watch. The window stopped at 2 inches, as if she'd measured that distance into a rule. Then the glass froze dark and mirror-smooth, catching the last of the sun. The crash woke me like a slap, wood screaming, hinges giving, gravel spraying under tires. I hit the porch, barefoot flashlight jerking across a storm of dust. The beam found cedar splinters strewn like kindling, and one hinge twisted into an ugly question mark. Headlights dwindled down the county road, a white tail of dust behind them. I crouched at the brake, fingers closing around a fist-sized chunk of my gate. It smelled raw and wet, as if rain had fallen inside the wood. The gravel still trembled. I pressed the splintered piece to my chest without meaning to, felt my heart knock against it, then set it on the post like a relic. By morning, an email had landed: special meeting compliance and community safety. So I drove to the HOA hall, a squat brick box with a flagpole out front and fluorescent lights that hummed like bees inside an old radio. The room was cool and bright in a way that made my eyes ache. Rows of plastic chairs faced a folding table where Karen sat, centered, a binder open like a lectern. Trevor hunched beside her, pen ready. A few neighbors I half knew filled the back row. Someone whispered my name and the word gate, like they were the same topic. Karen tapped a stack of papers and smiled wide enough to show teeth. "We're here to discuss a dangerous element introduced into our community." I stayed standing. "My gate is on my land." She tilted her head. "Your structure has caused vehicular damage and near collisions. The board has received multiple complaints." She glanced at Trevor. He cleared his throat. "For the minutes, Mr. Calder Bishop has created an unsafe obstruction inconsistent with the covenants. Put this in your minutes, I said, and set a plastic sleeve on the table. Inside lay my photocopy of the deed county stamp, dark and ugly. This land lies outside your lines. It always has. Karen didn't look down. We are one community. Not on paper, I said. A voice behind me. May I see that? It belonged to a woman with silver-streaked hair and a soft-shouldered suit. She stepped forward, polite as a librarian, and took the sleeve with 2 careful fingers. Who are you? Karen asked. Martha Quintero, the woman said. Property attorney. Mr. Bishop asked me to observe. I didn't ask. I started. Martha flicked me the quickest glance. He didn't need to. I dislike wasted time. She slid the deed out, scanned it, and tapped the seal with the calm of a metronome. Recorded. Meets and bounds outside this HOA's platted subdivision. I can provide a certified copy if your records officer needs one. Trevor's pen hovered, then scratched. Karen's smile thinned. Even so, the board can act on hazards affecting shared welfare. Judges don't listen to gossip, Martha said evenly. They watch footage. The room went still enough to hear the ballast in the lights crackle. I swallowed. Footage. Martha tucked the deed back into the sleeve and handed it to me. If I were you, I'd install cameras on your posts and at the road approach. Keep your copy of the deed on you. Make a log of every incident date, time, conditions, names if you have them. Speak clearly, don't escalate, and let the record do the pushing. Karen folded her hands. You can't record our members without consent. Martha turned toward her with a pleasant, almost bored look. On his property line, he absolutely can. Trevor scribbled faster. A man in the back row coughed and whispered, About time. Karen's voice sharpened. Mr. Bishop, the board is issuing a final notice. Remove your no, I said. My hands were steady on the seat back in front of me, knuckles white voice level. You don't get to name my gate into your rules. Karen's jaw worked. You will regret non-compliance. Martha leaned just enough to plant words between us like stepping stones. Mr. Bishop thanked the board for their time. I nodded at Karen. Thank you for your time. Karen lifted a gavel I hadn't noticed and tapped it once hard enough to make the fluorescent lights jitter. Meeting adjourned. Outside, the afternoon had that thin, papery glare autumn brings in Texas. I stood with Martha by the curb while cicadas buzzed in the live oaks. You showed up without me asking, I said. You looked like a man getting shoved toward a cliff, she replied. I don't enjoy watching shoves. I almost smiled. What'll this cost me less than the fines they'll try to stick you with? She slid a card into my shirt pocket. 2 cameras at least. Angle 1 to see vehicles before impact. Keep your voice on record when you address them, and don't announce the cameras. Let the red light do the talking. I thought of the midnight crash the way the beam of my flashlight had shaken over the wrecked hinge. They came through again last night. Martha's eyes measured my face. Then tonight, you'll be ready. By dark, I was on the ladder with a drill between my knees, the aluminum flexing under my weight. The new frame Hank and I had set stood raw and stubborn streaks of clean weld still visible where the cedar would later hide them. The wind smelled of dust and someone's laundry soap drifting from the subdivision. I strapped the first camera under the crossbar, angled down the drive. The little lens looked like a marble-opaque, uninterested patient. I tightened the mount until the plastic creaked. Hold, I told it. The second camera went on the post facing the road. I fed cables through conduit and into a weatherproof box, fingers numb with the fine work. When I flipped the breaker inside the garage, 2 red LEDs winked to life, dim and sure. One blinked slow and steady like a heartbeat that had made up its mind. I tested the feed on an old tablet grainy picture settling into view. The drive appeared in grayscale gravel like spilled salt, my boots like 2 dark commas at the bottom of the frame. I stepped back, breathed, then walked toward the road until my reflection in the camera lens blocked the sky. Mr. Bishop? A voice drifted from the fence line. A neighbor. Sage from down the way leaned on her steering wheel. Everything okay? Getting there. I lifted the tablet. Say hello. She waved at the lens and laughed when the screen waved back. Headlights crawled along the subdivision road, 2, then 3, then gone. I moved the tablet under the porch light and checked timestamps battery storage. Everything ticked in clean digits. I printed a fresh copy of the HOA minutes from the meeting. Trevor had already posted them, and slid it into the same sleeve as my deed. The plastic made a soft squeak I didn't know I needed to hear. I angled the porch chair so I could see both the tablet and the road. The broken piece of cedar still sat on the post beside me, raw edge catching the porch light like a scar. Sometime near midnight, an engine idled at the far edge of my property. I raised the tablet. The top camera drew a white rectangle where a car hovered just shy of the line. The red LED pulsed. A moment later, the engine cut. I walked to the gate and set a palm on the new frame. It was cool now, the day's heat bled off into the dry air. I could feel the weight of the steel the way it settled into the concrete like a man leaning his shoulder into a friend. From the subdivision road, an SUV crept forward and then stopped again. The window lowered 2 inches. A small light glinted the tight square of a screen, then winked out. "Good evening," I said, not raising my voice. The post camera recorded my breath fogging in the first cool snap of the season. Silence. Then the SUV floated backward, tires whispering in the dust, and slipped away. I set the tablet on the porch rail and pressed the back of my wrist to my mouth, surprised to find it steady. The cameras hummed. The porch light ticked. Somewhere a dog barked once and thought better of it. I picked up the broken cedar piece, felt its ragged edge, and set it back in place. "You're not done yet," I told it. Neither am I. The red LED blinked once more, slow as a wink. Next time, I whispered into the quiet, "It's all on record." By noon, the heat had a weight to it, pressing the gravel flat until it shone like scales. I'd left the porch chair aimed at the drive and the tablet propped on the arm, the security feed steady as a held breath. The gate looked plain as ever, cedar, face iron strap hinges a workday, kind of handsome. Only I knew its bones. Engines rose before the dust did. One, then another, then a handful braided together into a low thunder. I stood, set my coffee down, and watched the white SUV crown the hill like a float in a parade. 2 more SUVs tucked in behind. The HOA treasurer's maroon minivan. A silver sedan with its blinker clicking like a metronome that never learned to count. Somewhere behind me the porch fan ticked. The sound felt a mile away. Sage rolled to the shoulder in her hatchback and leaned out the window with her phone. "This'll go viral," she said, half a laugh, half a warning. I didn't answer. The convoy fanned out across the entrance tires, worrying the edges of my ruts as if they could loosen the line by rubbing it raw. Karen's SUV never slowed. The sun put a white knife down the ridge of her hood. She held the wheel like a judge holds a gavel, ready for the performance of it. The front bumper kissed cedar. Then it shoved. For a heartbeat, you could hear the gate consider it a groan that sounded like old timber telling a story. Then the steel answered. Everything stopped. The SUV's nose crumpled with a metal cough. The hood buckled up in a fault line. Karen's head snapped forward, then the airbag punched the cabin full of chalky white with a thoughtless whump. The whole truck rocked backward and sat there pinned to a thing that wasn't supposed to exist. I kept my hands at my sides. Behind her, the minivan braked late and swerved. The sedan cut right gravel slashing under the tires. Karen stomped the gas as if the gate owed her. The frame didn't even shiver. She threw it in reverse. The rear wheels bit, then skipped. The disguised trench took the moment it needed, half a rotation, and fed the tires to the hidden teeth with 3 wet pops. Rubber shredded into black streamers. The SUV sagged in a slow kneel. Sage's phone shook with laughter around her breath. Oh, man. I glanced at the porch tablet. 2 red dots blinked steady in the corner of the feed. The picture was steady, too. Black numbers ticking the timestamp like a witness who wasn't going to forget. From the camera above the crossbar, you could see the crease in Karen's hood like a white seam. From the post camera, you could read the HOA parking stickers on the windshields behind her. The minivan idled in the ditch, rear wheel off the ground driver, gripping a clipboard as if it might float him. The sedan's driver stayed put, hands at 10 and 2, like a teenager on a driving test he wished would end. Karen's airbag deflated to a sad pancake. She shoved it aside, pushed the door open with her shoulder, and stumbled out into the heat. The chalk dust clung to her blazer. Her sunglasses were gone. For the first time since I'd met her, her eyes were just eyes. "You," she said, throat raw, and jabbed a finger toward me. "You said of this trap, you could have—" "This is a gate," I said, calm enough to surprise myself. "And this is my land." Sage. From the shoulder said, "Smile." Karen then bit her lip to smother a laugh she knew wasn't kind. A couple of trucks I didn't recognize pulled over on the county road. Folks leaned against their doors the way people do when something loud happens in a quiet place. A man in a fishing shirt shaded his eyes with a palm and said to no one, and everyone, "Well, I'll be." Karen put both fists on her hips and looked back at the damage like she needed its testimony. "You can't build this," she hissed. You can't do this. It's malicious." "It's a boundary," I said. She took a step toward the gate, then flinched when a sliver of chrome winked up from the gravel. The disguised trench looked like any other wear in the drive unless you knew where to look and what for. She knew now. I stepped down from the porch slow so no one mistook the motion for anything it wasn't. The porch boards creaked a small familiar greeting under my weight. I stopped with my boots at the gravel's edge and tipped my chin toward the post. "It's all recorded," I said, and let the red LED answer with a blink. Micro-climax, right there, the kind that doesn't need shouting. Someone in the minivan muttered, "Call the sheriff." Another voice chimed, "Already did." Phone cameras multiplied like flies. Karen's jaw clicked. "You think this little performance will save you? I think the camera will tell the story better than either of us." She opened her mouth, closed it. For a second, the mask dropped and I saw the arithmetic of it in her face, the cost, the optics, the humiliation standing here knee-deep in her own certainty. Sirens didn't scream. They made that smaller whoop they use when they'd rather not. The sheriff's cruiser nosed to the shoulder. Deputy Cole Avery unfolded himself from the driver's seat gaze tracking from the crumpled SUV to the cedar planks to my face. His toothpick wasn't in his mouth today. "Afternoon," he said to the group at large. "Everybody okay?" Karen found some volume. "He built a booby trap," she said, pointing like the gesture could write law in the air. "He could have killed someone. Kids could have been in that car." Cole's eyes moved to the post. "Camera 2, I said. "One on the crossbar, one on the post. They've been running a week. You told me to bring video." He dipped his head a millimeter. "I did." Karen's voice ratcheted up. He admitted, "It's a trap." I shook my head. "I said it's a gate." Cole took 2 steps forward and looked at the trench, then at the frame, then at the anchor plates sunk like bedrock. He studied the tire ribbons without touching them. For a long breath, the heat hummed. Even the cicadas seemed to lean in. "Ms. Howell," he said finally, using her last name like he was pinning it to a corkboard, "you want to give me your statement?" She gathered herself, ironed her blazer with both hands as if smoothing the story, and nodded. "Yes. He's obstructing community easement. He's endangering residents. There's no easement," I said, still soft. "I've got the deed on record. You've seen it." Cole lifted a hand toward me without looking a quiet hold. To Karen, he said, "We can take statements. We can collect video. We can let the county attorney sort it." Behind him, Sage had already stepped into the patch of shade thrown by her car and was editing something with her thumb. "Title," she asked herself, almost private, then read it out smiling like she'd found a rhyme, HOA Karen versus my ranch gate they never saw coming. The silver sedan driver groaned. "Oh, come on." Cole Hurd glanced inside into the heat. He put his notebook away like a man shelving an argument he knew would be back tomorrow. "Mr. Bishop," he said, "I'm going to tell you something you already know." He looked at the camera, then at me. "Expect a lawsuit by morning." I nodded. The red LED blinked. The gate didn't move, and for the first time in months, my hands didn't shake. The courthouse doors breathed when they opened, wood swelling and sighing like an old chest. Fluorescents hummed overhead a thin electric note that flattened the air. I slid into a pew near the front. The wood was slick with polish and a little sticky from heat. Microphones waited along council tables like black lilies. Karen strode in wearing a crimson suit the shade of a warning light, HOA board members drafting behind her in pale neutrals. Martha squeezed my shoulder as she sat. "Judges watch screens. Not speeches," she said. Her hand was cool, steady as a plumb bob. The bailiff called the case voice ringing off the molding. The judge adjusted his glasses, the frames catching a square of light. A court reporter's hands hovered over a steno machine, fingers like small birds ready to peck meaning out of sound. Karen angled herself to the gallery the way a candidate squares to a camera. The HOA's lawyer, a tidy man with a tie like a tight knot, stood first. He cleared his throat into the mic and it clicked once before it caught him. "Your Honor," he began, "this is a matter of reckless endangerment. Mr. Bishop constructed a booby," he caught himself. "A trap masquerading as a gate designed to cause harm, and he has obstructed a long-standing community easement." My mouth went dry. Martha slid a folder across and tapped the tab Deed. I could feel the paper through the cardstock, its courthouse stamp like a coin pressed into cloth. "Thank you," she murmured without looking at me, then rose. When she spoke into the microphone, it did not complain. Her voice sat right on top of the room. "Your Honor, Martha said we will show 2 things: the property lies outside HOA jurisdiction, and the only endangerment arose from repeated trespass. We'll begin with the recorded deed." The judge nodded small and precise. A deputy wheeled out a monitor on a squeaky cart that made the whole room glance down at their shoes. Martha handed up a certified copy of the deed. A clerk took it in both hands, and it disappeared into the small machinery of the bench. For the record, Martha continued, meets and bounds Polk County recorded. She gave the book and page, not flogging it, only laying rails. The judge marked something with a fountain pen that made a soft scritch. "Proceed," he said. Martha lifted a remote. The big screen flickered, then filled with my drive-in grayscale cedar face of the gate gravel like spilled salt, the corner timestamp ticking. The audio carried heat hum and tires. The white SUV crowned the rise. Someone in the gallery sucked air. The footage rolled contact refusal, the gate holding like a spine that knew its job, the hood folding, the airbag's white blossom, the slow kneel as the disguised trench took the weight and the tires began to fail. A murmur swept the pews like wind through grass. In the second angle you could see the HOA sticker in a windshield and my porch rail steady as a level. The HOA lawyer stood trying to talk through the image. This proves Martha's finger 2 inches off the table stilled him without touching anything. "We'll let the video speak," she said, and the judge's eyebrows agreed. The screen froze on a frame where you could see Karen's hand tight on the wheel, jaw set, eyes clear through shattered sunglasses. In the gallery, somebody whispered, "That's the one." The reporter worked keys, clicking a soft rain. I watched her mouth move as she mouthed a phrase to herself, then typed it, "They never saw coming." The words landed like a private joke set down in the official record. When the video ended, the room breathed again. The judge shuffled the deed once and looked at Karen's lawyer. Response. He rose but couldn't find a start that didn't sound like an apology. "Your Honor, even accepting the deed, there exists a de facto easement usage by the community for years. Mr. Bishop's device, Martha Gate. Gate is concealed with the intent to damage vehicles." Martha stood so calm, I felt my own spine mimic hers. "No concealment, Your Honor." A standard ranch entrance reinforced against repeated collisions. The danger was the driving, not the gate. And the so-called easement, no grant. No reservation. No recording. We checked the plats. We checked the abstracts. There's nothing. The judge tipped his glasses down and looked at the lawyer over the rims. "Do you have any document establishing an easement?" The lawyer's mouth opened, then shut. "We know recorded document, Your Honor." Karen stood abruptly. "I am the president," she said, voice bright with the edges filed off. "He cannot defy the—" She shifted to the plural like it had teeth. "We cannot allow—" The judge rapped his gavel once, a clean, sharp crack that bounced off the ceiling. "This is Court Ms. Howell, not your board." There was a ripple of laughter the room tried to swallow. I kept my eyes on the wood grain of the pew in front of me, an oval of varnish worn thin where hands have worried. My hands rested there now. I could feel my heartbeat in the pads of my fingers. It wasn't racing. It was steady. "Miss Quintero, the judge," said, turning. "Anything else?" Martha pressed a page from a thin folder, the kind that eats staples for breakfast. "One more item, Your Honor." HOA minutes noting a final notice mailed to my client regarding his gate. The HOA acts as if it has jurisdiction. It does not. She placed the minutes on the evidence cart. Trevor on the aisle looked suddenly interested in his own shoes. The judge leaned back, chair creaking. He regarded the screen one last time, then the deed, then us. "All right," he said as if to himself. "All right." He set the pen down and spoke to the air above the bench, which is where rulings live before they have names. Claim of easement fails for lack of any grant or record. HOA acted outside jurisdiction. As to the allegation of reckless endangerment, the only reckless driving I see is on the video. Case dismissed. Costs assessed to the association. For a half-second, the room held still like a coin hanging in the air. Then the sound came, low boots on wood, a sigh, a soft mm-hmm. From someone's grandmother, a whispered, "There it is." The reporter's keys fluttered. Karen's crimson looked suddenly loud and thin. Microphones clicked as they went dead. The bailiff called the next case, and the fluorescent hum returned like the dull whine of a bug. We filed out past the flag and the bulletin board where lost dogs and church suppers shared thumbtacks. On the steps, a woman I'd seen at the lake touched my elbow and said, "Thank you," with a small embarrassed laugh like she wasn't sure for what, only that something had set right. Martha handed me a manila envelope on the sidewalk. "Certified copy of the order will take a few days," she said. "But this is the transcript request. Keep it. We'll get a stamped copy of the deed attached for your files." I turned the envelope in my hands. It picked up a smudge of red dust. Do I owe you? You'll owe me when the check from the HOA clears, she said, and allowed herself a smile that lived mostly in her eyes. Go home. Let it be quiet for one evening. It was for almost one. At dusk, the sky tasted like metal and rain that wouldn't happen. I dropped my keys in the bowl and found among the grocery flyers a crisp white certified letter. The green card clung to the back like a leaf. I turned it over, thumb finding the seam. Inside, formal language braided itself into something soft, in the spirit of healing, limited passage. We withdraw remaining complaints. If you... It ended with a flourish of Karen's pen as if signatures could rewind footage. I stood at the counter with the envelope open and the letter trembling just a little between my fingers. The kitchen clock ticked. The porch camera's red light blinked in the corner of the tablet patient as ever. Well, I said to the empty room that didn't take long. The fridge cycled on a polite throat clear. I slid the letter back into its sleeve, but not too far, leaving the signature peeking like a tail. Out on the road, a car drifted by without slowing. The gate held its line against the last of the day. Cold carried farther than sound that morning. Breath showed in little puffs, and the welder's arc made its own small sun against the pale sky. Hank steadied the post with both hands, shoulder-braced boots dug into the gravel like anchors. Hold her, he said. I said, visor down, bead. Humming. The frame took the weld, and the vibration traveled up my forearms like a pulse. When I lifted the hood, winter light flooded in tin, bright, clean, the kind of light that makes everything look honest. Hank squinted along the hinge line. A hair proud, he said, then grinned. But proud looks good on you this year. I tapped the seam with the slag hammer. Bolt me that spreader again. He fished for the half-inch and came up with the 5/8. Wrong size, he muttered, then laughed at himself and went back into the bucket. Stubborn bolts make honest men curse, he said, offering the right one. I'm out of new curses, I told him. We'll recycle, he said, and the ratchet answered with a long, satisfying draw. From the house, the screen door creaked and clicked back. Lila's steps came quick down the porch. She had my mother's habit of walking on the balls of her feet when she carried news. Hey, Dad, she called, stopping just shy of flying gravel. I brought donuts, but they're state's evidence cold. She pulled a bakery box from under her arm, pink lid gone soft at the corners. And Martha's right behind me. Bless both of you, Hank said. I can't weld on an empty sugar. Martha's sedan turned into the drive and idled beside the old pecan. She stepped out with a leather folio tucked into the bend of her elbow and that smile she used when something had landed exactly where it should. Morning, Mr. Bishop, she said. Hank, Counselor Hank said with a nod. We're making Calder's line prettier than mine. Now the whole town knows the line is yours, Martha told me, eyes going to the hinge cap, then to the footing. Let's make it official with their money. In the kitchen, the heater clicked on and the smell of donuts warmed into the air like a memory. Martha set out the packet from her folio on the table, a check stapled to a cover letter, then another letter with the HOA seal stamped deep enough to raise the paper. 2 items today, she said, tapping each. Restitution for property damage. She glanced at the figure and allowed herself half a breath of satisfaction and an admission letter from the association acknowledging trespass. Lila slid into the chair across from me, chin in her hand, eyes dancing. You going to frame that, Dad? I might nail it to the gate, I said. Don't, Hank said from the doorway, powdered sugar on his mustache. Paper hates weather. Martha folded the restitution check under the cover sheet and pushed the admission letter forward so it stood alone in the light. Read it, she said. Out loud if you like. I held the page. The HOA's letterhead looked tired, this close the blue a shade dimmer than it wanted to be. We acknowledge the events recorded on month day resulted from decisions made by association officers acting beyond the scope of the bylaws. We accept responsibility for damages to Mr. Bishop's property and affirm his right to restrict access to his private road. A signature from the interim president trailed off like a man stepping carefully off a porch he'd misjudged in the dark. I ran my thumb along the bottom edge and felt it catch the raised seal. Martha handed me a pen. Initial there, she directed, and sign there. It doesn't change the admission, it acknowledges receipt. Lila held up her phone camera already open. Smile like you mean it, she said. My smile's out back in the concrete, I told her, but I smiled anyway as I put the pen down and wrote my name in the neat, plain letters my father insisted on when he taught me to sign for deliveries. Hank tossed the cap and I caught it without looking. It clicked onto the pen like a period clicking onto a sentence that had taken its time. Martha slid a duplicate into a sleeve and passed it back. "This copy lives with your deed," she said. "They belong together now." I tucked the sleeve behind the deed in the binder where I kept records tabs I'd labeled with a shaky hand months ago, now straight and easy to read. "Feels like a new binder," I said. "Feels like a different spine," Martha said. We walked the drive to look at the finished hinge caps. The cold let sound carry the tiny metal ting of each step on gravel, the distant hollow thrum of a boat out on Lake Livingston, even the thin squeak of the porch flag's clip on its ring. Lila walked with her hands in her pocket scarf tucked clean as a rule. She stopped by the new crossbar and put her palm to it like you might to the shoulder of a horse. "Take my picture?" she asked. "Live dangerously," Hank said, smirking. "Stand in the easement that never was." She rolled her eyes at him and gave me the phone. I stepped back and the gate filled the frame, cedar slats warm against the cold day steel quiet beneath. Lila smiled with her mouth closed the way she did when she wasn't sure if Joy would behave. "One more," I said from the other side. We took it. When I handed her the phone, she looked at the thumbnails, two little squares that made a before and after. You could only understand if you'd been here for the long middle. "Add it to the album," she said. "The one with the house and the fence posts and Grandpa's hat." "I will," I said, and my chest hitched like a floorboard catching in winter. Back inside, Martha flipped the admission letter to the last paragraph and pointed with the edge of a fingernail. "Here," she said, "this line matters. The association will adopt internal guidelines to prevent future overreach by officers when dealing with properties outside HOA jurisdiction." "Guidelines," Hank said. "Fancy word for don't do it again." "Fancy is fine," Martha said. "Paper is better." We stood quiet for a long second. The heater sighed. Somewhere in the ductwork, a thin pop. I realized I was holding the letter a little too tight and let my fingers loosen. "That's the picture," Martha said. "You standing with paper that answers the noise." She packed the folio and pushed back from the table. "I have a meeting in town, but I'll swing by later if the mail brings what I expect." "What's that?" I asked. She smiled. "Policy always wakes up late." After she left, Hank and I went back outside. We greased the hinge caps with a small careful squeeze and wiped the threads. I worked the latch 3 times and listened for that even satisfying click, the one that tells you you're closing something without slamming it. Lila stood on the porch with a blanket around her shoulders, watching like people watch a fire. Half for warmth, half for what it does to the shapes of familiar things. "Hold still," she said, and snapped another picture. "For the family album. What caption?" I asked. She thought for a second. "How about the day the line quit wobbling?" "That'll do," Hank said. The afternoon thinned to a soft gray. A bluebird landed on the fence and cocked its head like it was trying to remember a punchline. When the mail truck finally rattled down the county road, the sound reached us before the white nose showed between pines. The carrier rolled to a stop, flipped the lid of the box, and tucked a flat envelope inside. The weight of the thing was visible in her wrist. The flap shone where a seal had been pressed. I walked down slow, letting the gravel think about each step. The envelope wore the HOA crest in a dark blue that didn't try to shout this time. The flap was closed with a circle of adhesive stamped with their seal. It looked like a wax coin. Hank whistled low. "Official." Lila leaned over the porch rail. "What is it?" I turned it in my hands, feeling the ridge of paper where something stiff lay inside. "We'll open it when Martha gets back," I said, slipping it under my arm like a book you save for the right chair. On the way back up the drive, I ran the gate closed. The latch gave that exact click again. The sound carried all the way to the porch, and judging by her smile, all the way to Lila's phone. BBQ smoke carried across the lake before the music did. It drifted in lazy plumes, sweet and peppery, tangling with the spring breeze. The rebuilt gate swung on its hinges with a clean, deliberate click steel inside cedar. Outside, no secrets left. Folks clapped when they heard it shut like a door on a story that had taken too long to end. Sage had her phone propped against a mason jar. She adjusted the angle until the frame caught both the gate and the tables strung with checkered cloth. "Gate of Justice," she said into the lens, grinning. "Watch this." The live stream counter ticked hearts blinking like fireflies. Kids wove between chairs with plates of brisket. Hank leaned against a cooler, swatting at the smoke with a paper plate, and called, "You owe me a welding apprenticeship fee." Calder. His laugh cracked like old cedar. "Pays lousy," I told him, and he raised a rib in salute. Martha arrived late work, still tugging at her hem, but she carried a thin folder tucked under her arm. She tapped it once on the picnic table, metal clip glinting. "Before I eat," she said, "let's read what they finally signed." She handed the page to Sage. Sage cleared her throat, hamming it up like a school kid asked to read in class. Article 6 amended. Private roads outside HOA plats shall be respected as private property. No assessment or enforcement shall be applied beyond subdivision boundaries. She looked up, eyes shining. In plain English, keep your tires where they belong. Cheers lifted not loud but long enough to feel. Plastic cups thumped against tabletops. Somebody yelled, "About time." Martha let herself smile without law to hide behind. She folded the amendment copy and slid it into my breast pocket like a boutonniere. Neighbors gathered near the gate. I swung it open slow, let the cedar face catch the sun, then let it close again. The latch sang its small metal note. Applause came easy, mingled with the hiss of brisket fat hitting coals. Lila stood beside me, one arm looped through mine. "Take a bow," she whispered. I shook my head. "It's a gate, not a stage." "Then let me," she said, and she hugged me quick and her chin digging my shoulder the way she had as a child when storms rattled the windows. "I'm proud of you, Dad." The smell of BBQ thickened laughter stretched into the dusk. Sage narrated for the stream. Hank cracked another joke about bolts that never fit. Martha finally sat to eat napkin folded with lawyer's precision. Karen was nowhere unseen. Her absence said more than her presence ever had. When the sun slid low and the lake caught fire in reflection, I stepped back to the gate and touched the crossbar. The wood felt warm, not just from the sun, but from being seen finally as what it was. "Every man has a gate worth defending," I said. Not loud, not for the crowd, just enough for Lila beside me and maybe for the camera light blinking red at the corner of the post. Sage called final toast cups lifted. Glass clinked against plastic against tin. The cheer folded into laughter, and laughter folded into the easy murmur of neighbors glad to linger. The air was heavy with smoke, with spring, with the kind of peace you only taste after a long fight has gone quiet. The gate closed once more, the click carrying through the evening. It held, and so did we. The lake shimmered in late sunlight as the gate clicked shut, steady as a heartbeat, while BBQ smoke drifted past the laughter of neighbors. Holding that latch reminded me the line was no longer a battle but a bond rebuilt with steel cedar and trust. The court's order, the amended bylaws, and the applause at the lakeside were proof that boundaries can be honored without bitterness. What mattered most wasn't the paper in my binder, but the way my daughter hugged me and the way folks lingered to share food and memory. Justice isn't loud, it's steady. Share your own HOA experiences in the comments below.